Yeah, I think we'll open the round of presentations. And just for you to know, what we thought for today is we would have about 15 minutes presentation time per speaker. And then we will always have one speaker react to the presentation of another speaker. So it's kind of to get a discussion started. And again, you are really encouraged, and we would love to also see your questions and your thoughts. So use the chat, and we'll have really ample discussion time after each presentation. Yeah, okay. So with this, I'm happy to give the floor to Livia Nolasco-Rojas, who will kick us off with the first presentation. She's a curator and an art historian at ZKM, the Center for Art and Media, with a special focus on media art and the virtual condition. Livia, you are the head of the Beyond Matter Research Project, which is an international practice-based endeavor developing new solutions for the digital documentation and network presentation of exhibitions, among other research questions. And today you will present one of the many, many aspects of this project, and I'm really excited to learn even more about Beyond Matter. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barbara, for this kind introduction. And thank you for all of you for being here today. As Barbara just mentioned, we will have a deeper look into a certain element of the Beyond Matter project, which is actually quite a central element of this collaborative research endeavor that we started together with different organizations in 2019. At the time, it was before the pandemic, but we already had the idea and we already had the aim to work together on multiple solutions to expand our exhibition spaces into the virtual. Very different types of institutions started to work together with us on this. From the Centre Pompidou in Paris, being the biggest institution, and the Tallinn Art Hall in Tallinn in Estonia, or the Ludwig Museum Budapest being mid-size contemporary art institutions, or the Tirana Art Lab being a very, very small NGO basically, but still one of the most important actors of the contemporary art scene in Albania. And also we had the support and the collaboration of the EPFL pavilions from Lausanne and the Aalto University from Finland. The ZKM has been leading the Beyond Matter project in the last almost 4 years. And we will finish it very soon. So this is why we have the chance to see most of the results we developed throughout the last years. So let me share my screen and start with the presentation of a website simply. It is a website that we might call our little anti-Zuckerberg metaverse, if I may put it that way, since it is important for us that on this site we publish different projects that are based on the archive of one or the other partner, of one or the other institution, that are the results of the residency program that took place, that was organized throughout the Beyond Matter project, and that we also present different curated exhibitions in one or the other way. So basically we are bringing together very different sources onto one platform, and we hope that these contribute to our digital commons. So at least that was the idea from the beginning on. And in order to achieve that, we asked web developers to create a sort of planetary system that is already spatial in itself. And here you can see currently 8 different exhibitions, or 4, I'm very bad at counting. Yeah, 7 different exhibitions. And as I mentioned, they are results of very different projects, and also they are coming from different parts of Europe. So maybe let's start with from the back with the Tirana time capsule, Whole Science, and Pandemonium. These are 3 exhibition projects, solo exhibition projects of artists who were resident artists in Beyond Matter. And as you can see, the artists were relying on different open source solutions, just like Unity in this case. And Alex Wormsey, who is the artist of this environment, made some photogrammetric recordings in Tirana at a certain part of the city, which doesn't exist anymore. So it was before the demolition of this neighborhood. And you can wander around if you are not as lame as I am in this exhibition space, which is created and set up by the artist. So this is actually one possibility to dive into a newly created, artistically created world. But if we get back to the platform, then there are 2 further, obviously very different platforms. And I wouldn't go into detail because we have quite a limited amount of time, and would rather present this quite interesting project, which is between an archive and between a curated exhibition platform. The Tirana Floating Archive is actually digital. That obviously doesn't work. So the Tirana Floating Archive is a platform where 40 different projects from the period of 2002 can be accessed, and they are also thematically clustered by the curators. But by the way, this is the first published research on public art in Albania.
Livia, do you want me to share the screen? Because I'm able to open the website if you want.
I think it's fine. We wouldn't really have the time to.
I'll put the link in the chat. Sorry,
either, but it's good to know that it functions in another browser or another environment, or maybe with another IP address. Yes. So thank you. The next one is quite an interesting exhibition complex, one could say so. It's, well, first of all, Spatial Affairs was a physical exhibition, and we created simply a photogrammetric recording of this physical exhibition, which was quite usual, or it became quite ubiquitous throughout the pandemic, since most of the museums didn't want to. They already had exhibitions and they didn't want to lose their audiences to the lockdowns. So in the end, they opted for such a solution, in which they created just a photogrammetric recording of their exhibition spaces and added certain amount of information to it. So it's possible to include pop-up windows in this. and reproduce a physical exhibition online. So in this case, just in order to show the possibilities and to include this possibility, and also because our project was impacted by the pandemic, and this exhibition actually opened throughout the, I don't remember which wave, but I suppose the second wave of lockdowns in Hungary. So the opening was an absolutely solitary experience, but this solution was available already at the time, and it could be published in a way. Although this exhibition, Spatial Affairs, already from the beginning was conceived as a hybrid exhibition, and we already started from the beginning on with a double way of approaching it, and we selected net-based artworks. So we selected net-based artworks specifically for the platform because on the one hand, we didn't want to grab them out from their natural habitat and bring them into the museum, into this quite wide cube exhibition space of the Ludwig Museum Budapest, but we wanted to create a new habitat for them, so to say. And you can see sort of crawlers or different entities that are hovering around this exhibition space that is absolutely the opposite, and obviously on purpose the opposite of a wide cube exhibition space. So they are avatars of the artworks, actually. And as soon as you click on them, you will find an introduction to the piece and also an image of it, and information on the artists, and then you can visit one or the other online piece that are all spatial, actually. So for example, here, if I click on it, then sooner or later this environment by Sasha Poflep and Matthew Lutz and Alessandro Viati loads, and then I can explore it. Okay, well, there's much more to explore in this exhibition space. And there's also interaction possibilities. So if you sign in, you find a chat. And we also developed what you cannot see right now, but for guided tours, we developed a different type of avatar, which can broadcast its video and sound, and also has a pointer. Its nose actually can grow, and with the nose it can point at the different artworks to show around in the exhibition. And in order to bring in the physical exhibition that was from the beginning part of the same project, we included a video recording of the photogrammetric documentation of the physical exhibition that you can see here on the screen. So it's a sort of a mise-en-scène scenography within the virtual space. We are quoting from a physical space and try to completely blur the boundary between the physical and the virtual through this exhibition. Furthermore, there are these strange creatures around here that are interactive, and when I hover over them with the mouse, they start to pulsate and start to change their color. And if I click on them, it turns out, or I'm being told, that they are wormholes, and they are actually voice recordings from different manifestos and theoretical texts that were in the catalog of the exhibition, or in some cases they were also part of the physical exhibition. So this one is a quote from Bogna Konyor's The Dark Forest Theory of the Internet, which I warmly recommend to read it as a whole, not just to listen to this small quote here. So this beautiful environment was, by the way, designed by the Rodina, and it's based on an open source game engine, which is called Babylon.js. And unfortunately, we have to leave it behind, although I really like to spend some time here. But we have some further projects to look at. The next one being Iconoclash as a digital experience. Or maybe I first start with Les Immatériaux as a virtual exhibition. Les Immatériaux was an exhibition at the Centre Pompidou in 85, so almost 40 years ago. And in this exhibition, curated, by the way, by Jean-François Lyotard and Thierry Chaput, the two curators tried to describe the postmodern condition through 61 different sites that were thematically arranged and curated. They included different types of exhibits, not only artworks, but also material samples, different types of clothing, computers, Minitel machines, and so on and so forth. And this exhibition has been quite important lately mostly for scholars and researchers. Already 3 monographies were published on the exhibition itself, and the 4th monography is already on the way, written, by the way, by the researcher who was contributing to the creation of this platform. And the idea or the aim with this platform was to evoke past exhibition and to bring it into our temporality and our actuality in a way. And the colleagues at the Centre Pompidou who were deciding about their design opted for an archive, so to present their archive in an enhanced way. And this is why this site is starting with, well, first of all, with the motif that you could find on the poster, then on with an archive video of the exhibition, and then an introduction to the different topics, the exhibition, but also the virtual model of the exhibition brought up. And then we see the 61 sites, and we see a floor plan of the show, and we can also enter the so-called virtual exhibition. The soundscape of the show was quite fundamental. So you will hear immediately the original French soundscape that we can also click away. And then we can enter the space of the exhibition, and by clicking on the artworks or exhibits, we can access further information on them. So it's really like a spatially extended archive, but also a quite interesting and strange mixture of a spatially extended archive and an echo shooter game, practically. And if we manage to enter the exhibition space, then we are confronted with this wonderful first site, and to each and every site a different soundscape. So a different soundscape is part of each and every site. Well, unfortunately, we can't spend more time here, but let me just show the last project, which is also a past exhibition. A past exhibition which was called Iconoclash. It took place more than 20 years ago at the ZKM, at the Center for Art and Media, and it was curated mainly by Bruno Latour and Peter Weibel. It was their first common endeavor. And it asked the question what representation may mean in the turn of the 20th and 21st century. The exhibition tried to answer this question with bringing together different kind of iconoclasms from the field of sciences, from the field of the arts, and religion, and also politics. Our exhibition model is very different from the exhibition model of Les Immatériaux from the Centre Pompidou, because we didn't reconstruct the space. We took the different elements, the temporary architecture and the artworks from the space, and put them on a plane. As soon as you enter the exhibition space, and this is a demo, so this is a demonstration of how it works, but each and every artwork has an activation zone around this, around itself, which was indicated with the green halos around them. And as soon as I enter into an activation zone of, for example, this Marcel Duchamp work, then all the other artworks that are similar to this one, and they share different tags, they share a certain amount of tags, they are coming closer to me, and the others are drifting apart. With that, a profile is being built up. So here you can see that until now I've seen 20th century works. These are all the keywords, all the tags that the artworks are tagged with. And the recommender system is constituting this relational space that is not dependent on an architecture, an already pre-given architecture, but it's dependent on my movement within the space as a visitor. So that's a crucial difference between physical exhibition space and the digital exhibition space in that sense. And the last one, what I would like to show is actually based on, is a generic exhibition platform that is based on the Iconoclash model. And on this
generic exhibition platform.
Exactly. So here you can see how it functions. So we just set this up in order to show the functionalities of this possible system, and also to encourage practically anyone to create their own exhibitions that they can put online, because we will publish the code. Actually, it's due next week. The code will be available front-end and back-end open source. So you can download it and start to set up your own browser-based malleable and dynamic exhibition with the recommender system embedded in it. So for now, this is more or less it. And these are the options and possibilities that we dealt with throughout the Beyond Matter project. And we got as far as a generic exhibition platform. And we will also close the investigation with this tool that we developed for further use. So thanks a lot for your patience, and I hope you find the time to visit all these exhibitions that are out there on beyondmatter.eu/projects.
Wow, round of applause, Livia, amazing. Thanks so much. It's incredible how much you've done with Beyond Matter. It's really so fascinating, and there is so much to unpack. I think I'm gonna pass the mic directly to Duncan if you want to respond to this panoply of projects that we just saw. Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Livia. No, I think actually where you ended was so relevant, because it was the first question actually that came to my mind when you started the presentation regarding, I guess, the ability to share some of these tools, because, you know, ZCAM is always at the forefront of working with this type of media, or any type of media, I guess. And so knowing that these tools will be accessible going forward, or will be published open source in the spirit of some of the comments earlier, I just wanted to ask if you see these dynamic exhibition platforms or the recommender system that you're developing and sharing as a form of maybe meta curatorial practice or meta institutional practice in a way.
Thanks for the question. I'm not sure whether it shall be called meta curatorial institutional practice, and I do hope that this is going to be part of the toolbox of institutions, since it's just an offered way of creating accessible digital spaces where navigation is not so cumbersome as in other options, and as in copies of actual physical spaces, and also it's a possibility to create new contexts and enhance context creation with intelligent algorithm. So. In that sense, it's kind of new, but I really hope that instead of meta, it is becoming something that is rather closer to the ubiquitous adjective.
And I guess maybe playing devil's advocate as the counterpoint to that, is there any risk that I guess the way that the recommender system functions in a similar way to like the filter bubble of a social media feed, in that when I experience exhibitions in person, you know, I'm often introduced to artworks or perspectives that I'm not already open to, and that if you're being recommended things that are aligned with the things you've already been drawn toward, if there's any risk that you fall into a bubble there, a filter bubble.
Yeah, that's a very relevant point. And indeed, this is why we included a bird's eye view. So you can always jump out and see it from above, and then you can jump into a completely different point. So with that, you can burst the filter bubble, actually. On the other hand, there is room for improvement for sure. So that would be already the next step. So it would have been great if we could have implemented it, but it's for the next research term, let's say, or for the next turnus or step to enable the visitor to interact with the recommender system more than currently, because the interaction between the system and the visitor is pretty limited right now. But that could be something we could work on, and then it would get closer to a three-dimensional, optimized and AI-based browser, basically.
Yeah, super nice.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's great.
Livia, do you have, sorry, Duncan, if I'm jumping in, but
No.
it's so interesting to know also, are there any next steps planned? Because I believe the funding is running out on the Beyond Matter project, right? Do you already have something in view, or maybe this is a very emotional question? I don't know.
Well, it's not emotional, but I cannot disclose anything about that.
Okay, too bad. But let's just, I just want to express my hope that it can continue in the way it has continued. Sorry, Duncan, if I jumped in.
No, I know that these are always iterative processes. So there's always, with each stage, there are always new things to implement. Yeah, I guess the counterpoint to some of these new tools is this idea of the recreation of maybe more historic or significant exhibitions. And I wonder if you think about these maybe as, I don't know, almost like a spatial extension of more familiar publication formats, or is it something entirely different?
Yeah, could be. So, I mean, it is already an existing discourse, whether the catalog and the exhibition, so what the relation is between the catalog and the exhibition. And as I asked Bruno Latour about this, because as a preparation for this exhibition model, we conducted different interviews with the curators who answered our request, and we asked them about how they see it, how they see a possible digital model of their past exhibition, Iconoclast. And Bruno Latour said that it is another platform. So he sees the catalog as being one way to articulate the idea, to articulate the concept, and the exhibition was a spatial concept. And again, this online platform is something else, but the principle and the concept remains the same. And this was one conversation, and there was another conversation between the architect Manfred Wolf-Plottek and also Peter Weibel, who talked quite a lot about the spatial arrangement and how the thematic and the spatial arrangement had to do with each other, and how they wished already at the time to make it dynamic and to make it malleable. And it was not possible in a physical space, and they were quite thrilled about the possibility to make it move, basically.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I think it's really realizing some of the possibilities that are possible in a virtual space that aren't possible, in meet space. I only have one more question, and then I'm not sure if there are any in the chat, for example. But I was really intrigued when I think it was in discussion of spatial affairs. I think you used the phrase avatars of the artworks, and I thought that was such an interesting proposition, sort of suggesting the artwork as an independent entity or an agent in its own right. And I'm just wondering if you or if anyone else wants to chime in, if you think that's a possibility in the metaverse, maybe that doesn't exist in a traditional gallery space for this, not to remove the agency that artworks already have, but to maybe grant an additional degree of agency.
I guess that the already existing agency of the artwork can be instantiated maybe better in a virtual environment. So that might be the difference, yeah, these animated bodies are obviously accessed and will be perceived differently than static artworks, especially if you think about like how net art has been shown in museum environments. And obviously, museums have been very creative about showing net art with different types of kiosks, and they try to pep it up with different designs. But it's always something like, I don't know, including street art in a white cube exhibition space and these kind of things. Like it's not there where it should be. And that's another point. I think that's another important point, that these works are remaining where they belong.
Yeah, though I have to say, I really liked the potential, and then also when you dived into some of the other projects where suddenly not only the artworks are avatars, but also there's this spatialized archive even that is visible through the concept of a virtual rendering of an exhibition. That somehow is when it becomes even more interesting, because suddenly the curatorial spatial concept can be linked with artwork avatars that are then visualized as kind of, I don't know, the biomedia exhibition at ZKM, you would speak of the artwork community. But I think that's a really lovely potential there. Could be a nice ground of speculation. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much to the both of you. Thanks, Livia, and thanks, Duncan. And actually, Duncan, you can just stay in the spotlight with me, because, and to all of those who have joined a bit later, you can switch to the speaker's view mode on the top right of your screen, because dear Andy next to me is carefully curating our view. And I think we can move on to the next presentation, which will be Duncan. And to introduce you, dear Duncan, I would love to quote from your website. Duncan Bass is a cultural critic, curator, and the author of countless emails. I love that. Yeah, I would love to steal that quote from you. It's so good. Your focus is on the societal implications of emerging technologies and the politics of visuality. You're a curator at the Singapore Art Museum, in short, SAM. And I believe you'll be sharing the newest project, Open Systems, that launched just a week ago, I think, or a few days ago, if I'm right. Or maybe you're showing something else.
Maybe I'll say a few words about that project, but mostly I'm going to speak about something that's not out yet. So we're still in alpha testing.
Okay.
So,
I thought because it was a bit secretive, so I thought it has to be the thing that just launched a few days ago. But in that case, the floor is yours. Congrats on the launch of the other one, but even nicer to get an insight into something that is not out yet. Thanks so much.
So yeah, as Barbara said, I'm the curator at Singapore Art Museum with the focus in the area of media and technology. Just thanks to everyone who's organized this session. We'll get that out of the way ahead of time. And apologies if it feels like I'm lagging. I'm accommodating a time difference. It's not the internet. So I'm gonna, as I mentioned sort of briefly, I'm gonna share a little bit about a project that's launching later this year. So no one needs to sign NDAs, but things are prone to evolve, I guess, in the meantime. So before we start, I guess I'd like to call some attention to this generic template slide that's in our museum resources folder, which prominently frames the original home of Singapore Art Museum, which, because we're on a first name basis, I'm going to refer to primarily as Sam during this presentation. And so I think in order to understand where this project is coming from, the real impetus, it's important to understand the context of Sam within Singapore. The history of the building, the neighborhood, and the relatively short history of sort of formal arts institutions as we might recognize them in Singapore and the region more broadly. So the museum was founded in 1996 as the first art museum, dedicated art museum in Singapore, and quickly, because of Singapore's position in the region, became a predominant art museum in Southeast Asia. And so for more than 20 years, the museum was housed in this former Jesuit school, St. Joseph's Institution, which is a colonial era building that's sort of in the center of the city's cultural district. In the case of Sam, this colonial era building became sort of a proxy for the colonial impulse of museums writ large. That is this sort of impulse to collect, preserve, and display cultural artifacts in a mode that is about ordering things in a way. And perhaps most importantly in this case, it was replicating an institutional model that was defined in the colonial metropole, and particularly these standards of conservation, preservation, and interpretation that are now being sort of challenged in the region. I think this is sort of a potential pitfall that many institutions face in the post-colonial context, a kind of reification of the architecture and the collecting practices that if they're left unchecked, they perpetuate kind of entrenched cultural and material power structures in a way. So I think in, the city-state has changed a lot since this aerial photograph on my right, maybe your right, was taken in the late 1960s. So now the campus is surrounded primarily by high-rise buildings, as is much of downtown Singapore. But in 2019, the museum vacated this historic building for a number of reasons. It was in serious need of restoration and in a lot of ways wasn't conducive to the display of contemporary art. But in the minds of a lot of Singaporeans, particularly people of my generation, this is what an art museum looks like. So the location, the structure, the types of art that it chooses to show, all of these associations kind of are what art with a capital A means within this context. And so our goal is to reflect on these associations and what it means, what a museum means to its publics, in a sense. So when Sam made his departure from this longtime home, it sort of unexpectedly coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, as we all know, most institutions were forced to reconsider their role and their relationship to digital spaces, but also to their real life communities. So this virtual galleries initiative that I'm going to be discussing was conceived as a response to this trend of traditional institutions moving into virtual spaces. And this idea that that process often replicates their physical architecture, a process of digitizing their collections, or, for a brief moment at least, issuing NFTs with little consideration of the broader implications of what that means. So as part of a series of digital art initiatives that includes the Open Systems project that Barbara mentioned earlier, this series of virtual exhibitions are being developed over the next couple of years. This first one is in partnership with the research lab Form Axioms, which is I don't know that I would call it an architecture studio, but it's a studio by architects, we'll say that. So I should go ahead and take the opportunity to thank the principals at the studio, Eva Castro and Federico Roberto, and their team of researchers, because their technical ability and imagination pushed this project so far beyond the initial scope that I was considering. And again, just a disclaimer that we're in alpha testing stage, kind of focusing on scaling and optimization for the multi-user experience. So some of these renderings are already out of date even though I only put this together a couple of weeks ago. So the first iteration of this virtual galleries project leverages the potential of virtual space, I think like a lot of these other projects do, as well as virtual objects to transcend a kind of temporal or physical distance. So bringing together born digital artworks and environments with digital copies of artifacts in an attempt to question the extension of these colonial processes into virtual space. It also builds on these longstanding interests that I've had over a number of projects about ownership and intellectual property rights writ large. I've been speaking so much about Sam's historic location because at least for this first project, that's sort of the center. So it's based around this historic building, the St. Joseph's Institution, and kind of weaves together 3D scans, photogrammetry, digital renderings to create a version of this colonial architecture that's set somewhere in the distant future when our little island nation has been rewilded by an encroaching jungle and rising sea levels. So I think this project, which we've been so far referring to as Outpost, I think the post there is doing a lot of work, maybe post-colonial, post-Anthropocene, and depending on your reading of the project, maybe post-apocalyptic. So visitors spawn in this jungle outside the museum campus in an environment that is kind of modified or altered based on real-time weather data from Singapore. So the user experiences, it changes, 1 minute to the next, much like the weather in the region. So I think there are 7 or 8 different inputs here. They all say temp, but it includes, temperature, humidity, rainfall, the tides, wind speed, all sorts of things impact the environment. So this kind of speculative future that's imagined by the project aims to weave together these various strains. So of course, the island nation that has kind of succumbed to the ravages of climate emergency, a space that's populated by non-human or post-human entities in many ways, and a challenge to the colonial logics of museums that I was sort of touching on as we started. So based on a lot of local legends and lore surrounding this area and the building specifically, in the initial spaces, you kind of encounter these spirits that are haunting the historic building and the neighborhood through voices in the distance that lure the user toward the museum campus. In addition to those voices, there are also traces that mark the path of past visitors, which are recorded as these kind of ghostly projections that are distinct from other users that are simultaneously occupying the virtual environment. So once you're inside the museum site, users are able to alternate between 3 different modes of navigation. So there's, you can sort of roam freely in linear mode that features a solid museum structure and, this traditional thing that we're used to called gravity. You can use this nonlinear mode, which I guess allows you to be a little bit more ghostly or apparitional, kind of moving through the pictured point cloud structure or, flying, moving in an additional plane. And the third option is an archaeological mode, which offers a more structured journey through the space and is a little bit easier for maybe users who aren't so used to these 3D environments, and allows them to encounter these key elements of the museum building, the artist works, and focuses specifically on these, what I think of as architectural idiosyncrasies and the site's history. So regardless of the route that the user takes, the journey allows you to visit each of these spaces. So I guess you get the same key experiences regardless of the mode that you're using at any given time. And that includes the existing structure, but also elements of the building that have been demolished or replaced over the course of its long history. And through that journey, you encounter oral histories, artifacts from Singapore's history, but also contemporary digital artworks. Just an example, one of the spaces within the museum is a former chapel that's on the second level. So again, this was a religious school and had its own church on the premises. And these kind of histories that underlie the institution and are difficult to find in writing, but through oral histories are everywhere. So I think a good example is the stained glass window that was in the museum chapel was removed for quote unquote safekeeping during World War II in anticipation of the Japanese invasion. And supposedly was hidden so well that it was never discovered. I'm not sure if it was if it was accidentally broken, maybe during the process, but hidden so well that it was never discovered is the line that's repeated. And when Sam moved into the building, it was replaced by a contemporary work by the Filipino artist Ramon Orlina. So that's sort of featured in this space. There are 3D scans that are also kind of placed throughout the environment by contemporary artists. So I chose this one to highlight because it might be familiar to some folks at ZKM. This is Juan Covelli's Speculating the Fragmented Copy. And I think it was originally developed as part of a web residencies program that ZKM hosted in 2018 or 2019, curated by Tegan Bristow. So the objects here are pre-Columbian artifacts that were scanned in the Stephenhagen collection in Mexico City. So items that had been removed from their original location in Colombia, relocated to Mexico, and then were distributed freely online in violation of Mexico's national copyright law. So again, trying to underscore these questions of colonial collecting practices, ownership, and intellectual property rights. But we're also featuring artworks by Hings Lim, a Malaysian artist, Hut Sun Yen, a Singaporean artist, and Natasha Tanti, an Indonesian artist. Oh, those should have been deleted. So as you move through the space, you collect these elements based on the things that you find within the space, whether they're architectural fragments or artworks. And you're able to generate these 3D monuments or totems at the end of your journey based on the elements that you've encountered. So these are randomly generated based on text prompts composed of those elements that you've collected along the way. And after finalizing your composition, this 3D rendered totem is downloadable as an OBJ file, which allows visitors to repurpose these elements in their own 3D software or to 3D print them, kind of bringing these traces of the virtual experience into the physical world. But also after completing that, a copy of the 3D totem is then placed into the virtual environment, specifically that jungle outside the museum campus, which over the course of time populates with these user-generated structures, throughout the length of the exhibition. And the user is then transported to their totem and I guess can rinse and repeat or end the experience of that at that point, I suppose. So yeah, all of these elements, I guess, are independently functional, and we're looking forward to kind of bringing them into a collective kind of multi-user experience in the next 2 months or so. Should be out sometime this summer. And just a shameless plug, as Barbara mentioned, this project Open Systems launched recently as well. This is a research project that we've been working on that looks at video games or virtual environments as test beds for different ways of kind of thinking about social, political, or spatial organization. So online now at opensystems.sg, and every 2 weeks we'll have new content. Some of it is artist-made video games, some of it is machinima or animation made using these 3D or video game softwares. And after this first iteration, we're also in the process of building the museum campus and surrounding area as levels for Counter-Strike and Fortnite. So those will be released sometime later this year, if all goes according to plan. So I'll stop sharing.
Wow, thanks so much, dear Duncan. And it's also so interesting because not even by the half of this webinar, we have already seen so many different spatial concepts of what, you know, a virtual museum experience or a multidimensional institution in virtual space can look like. And I just thought it was really interesting to see with the Outpost how, you know, you go into decolonial research of the heritage of the museum space, and of course you kind of have to stick with the actual architecture because this is kind of the scene of where you're doing your research into. It reminded me of Ghostly Matters, this book by I think Avery Gordon. Yeah, and the motif of the ghost is so interesting in that scenario. Thanks so much, and I will pass on to Marina and Alina, or just Alina, I'm not sure, to give us a quick response. Both of you, okay, sweet. To maybe let's exchange some thoughts also on those two projects. Amazing.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much, Duncan, for sharing this impressive project with us. I'm really wow. Maybe one thing, it's like quite overwhelming. So such different layers and topics that you have in this project. How do you guide the visitor through the space? How do you take it by the hand, or how do you give information to the person entering first, and which is the target group also, maybe?
Yeah, I think with most of these projects, we're targeting, I hate to use this term, but a digitally native audience. So people that are already familiar with the kind of modes of navigation within these platforms. Within the space, I think a lot of the directional cues come from spatial lighting and audio. So in an attempt, these sort of like proximity-based audio that might draw you toward different spaces. So that's a big part of it within those more free roaming modes. And then of course, we introduced this more structured mode where you can essentially click through the, I think 13 spaces that we have highlighted as maybe the most prominent, either because of their, the oral histories of the space, or to highlight a specific artist project for people who are maybe a little less comfortable navigating the 3D space.
I have 1.5 question, Duncan. So first of all, thank you. You really topped the expectations. This architectural time travel is really just brilliant. I love it. I was wondering, how much do I have to know the building and the history to understand the idea? And of course, I would like to know how your team reacted on your way of, kind of destroying the museum or working with the with the dark history of the museum.
Well, I guess kill your darlings is a phrase I hold closely. I think you don't have to actually know very much about the building when you come into the space. I think a lot of it is shared through the experience. I think maybe as a visitor without so many associations with the architecture of the space, it might feel a bit less subversive than it would for someone who has maybe put this institution on a pedestal previously. But I think how freely people share I wouldn't even call them dark histories, because I think the way that ghosts function in Singapore and within the region, they're not like scary things, right? They're just things that you share space with. and how freely people share the stories about haunting or shared presence within these spaces. And to me, at least, in doing all of this research, suggests that it's just another layer of understanding the space. So, of course, some of those are darker, but a lot of them are not like spooky. They're just the reality, I guess, of sharing the space with non-human entities.
There were a lot of questions in the chat. So Barbara, would you like to take them?
Yes, unless Alina, do you have one last thought?
No,
Fine.
they can go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. So, I mean, we can stay with this. I thought it was a brilliant idea. You know, how did the team of the museum react? There was a question in the chat. How did you scan the objects? And I guess you could take this question as, you know, how did you like work with the whole building as a resource to put it digitally? How was maybe the technological process of that?
Yeah, so I relied heavily on the Forum Axioms team here. There were different degrees of I guess, scanning for the architecture, but also higher resolution for some of these architectural elements that we really wanted to highlight. So not being an architectural historian, like Ava, for example, you know, what stood out to her were these moments where different architectural forms came together that, you know, were clearly borrowed maybe from a Western context, but would have never been assembled in such a manner in a Western building. And so that's really where the idea of these totems came from, was this combination of elements that were exciting or interesting, but not necessarily conforming to the architectural rules of the periods that they were borrowing from. And then those expanded further to include or incorporate elements of these 3D scans that artists let us use freely as well. And I think a lot of this, whether it's pertaining to the building or the artworks, is about not necessarily treating them as precious in the way that you might an artifact, but instead as malleable because of their infinite reproducibility, I guess.
In the chat, even more precise, which program, software, hardware has been used for the scans? Do you know, or would that be a question for the studio you collaborated with?
I mean, we're building an Unreal 5. The scans, I mean, on the large scale, we were using drone photogrammetry and Faro scanner for the point clouds. For the more detailed scans, I think I'm not recalling the hardware, but I think those were kind of two primary elements that were used, and then those are all kind of edited and then imported into Unreal 5. And then it's all hosted. I mean, we have support from like some server systems. So this is all accessible in browser, but it's running on cloud-based graphics cards so that you get the kind of full rich experience without needing to like have a gaming quality machine at home.
Nice. And those totems, they're really like, this is part of the gamification of the experience, right? It's not just related to one artwork, but during the whole visit, you will be collecting some of the elements like you would in a video game, collecting coins or filling up your, I don't know, your basket full of, how do you say, of lacking. I'm not a video gamer myself, so I have a very bad lack of vocabulary, but like a survival kit or something. That's the idea, right? Yeah.
I like to think of them as like rare items in a video game. And then you do some crafting and you produce this unique element. And so we're also running as part of the launch of this program, 3D scan workshops sort of physically at the museum, and giving people the opportunity over the course of a couple of months to, if they want to have their, totems that they've created 3D printed, to print, exhibit, and then take them home at the end of the program. So you get, something to live with.
Have you estimated how long people are going to stay for a visit, or do you think they will come more often? Any ideas on that, how they're going to use it?
I expect single use, just knowing how I encounter the space. I wish I could answer that question because frankly, the server time is where all the cost comes from. So if I could anticipate how long everyone was using it, I would have a much easier time budgeting. But I think for example, in architectural mode or archaeological mode, the user experience is designed for somewhere around 20 minutes. So it's, I guess, respectful of people's time. If you want to wander beyond that in the other modes, it's open to do so. But I think the goal is not to be an imposition, but spark questions as opposed to provide all the answers.
I really like the idea that you can have your own souvenir in the real world by 3D printing something. It's very good.
Yeah, I also really like it. And it's actually a good segue into another question that popped up in the chat, which kind of maybe touches both projects that you mentioned, but the Outpost as well as the Open Systems one, which from Christina asking, are you building a mediation program around the virtual experiences, like online guided tours, online workshops, or this 3D printing workshop is kind of already a super nice link between both spheres. So maybe.
We started a Twitch channel a while ago, so we play games together sometimes, artist made games. And I'm sure once we launch Outpost or whatever we end up calling it, we'll do one of those Twitch streams as a tour of the space that we can do together. And right now the virtual space hosts about 20 concurrent users. So I think we're kind of maxing independent servers. So maybe 20 per server or something is what we'll get. So in that sense, we would be able to kind of do the tour as a shared virtual walkthrough, but also stream that through the Twitch platform as a way to make it visible or accessible. And I think for us at least, like using Twitch or like making the museum for Fortnite or Counter-Strike or something is really just an attempt to like meet people where they are. And instead of having users kind of find this thing and devote time to it, instead it's, using the visual language or the syntax of these existing platforms and trying to think about how we can complicate them or, vary them in a way.
Do you have opening hours? Can you hear me?
No, it's
okay.
Yeah. It's 24 hours.
Great. Okay.
Wow.
Because we don't. Yeah, I will speak about this later on. But it sounded like it's server-side rendering, and you said it's limited capacity. So I was curious about this. Yeah.
Although if you're inactive for a period of time, you do get kicked out. So
fair enough.
You can't. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Our project really have some things in common, so maybe we're gonna speak about our opening party with a lot of people waiting for entry.
Queuing in the digital space. Yeah. Nice. Well, yeah, I guess a lot is pointing to your presentation, Alina and Marina. I will say a few words about you just before we start, because you will present two projects to us today. The one being Next Museum I/O, which is a cooperation between the NRW Forum in Düsseldorf and the Museum Ulm, which is dedicated to the questions, what digital tools do museums need in order to stay relevant? So a very central question to our webinar series as well. And Marina, you are the project manager of Next Museum I/O at the Museum Ulm, so you will be talking about that project, and you are in close collaboration with dear Alina Fuchte, who just recently took on the position of Deputy Head of Education at the NRW Forum. Yay to that. And you will introduce us to the brand new WW Forum. Forum.
Yeah, we always say it in German because it's such a tongue breaker, is it? WW. Yeah.
So thankfully, we'll start with a video. And Andy, you can roll the first one about WW Forum. So nice. Go ahead, Alina.
Yeah, thank you. We thought we'd just start with a little teaser of our latest approach towards a multidimensional institution and show you a glimpse of the WWW Forum that we're going to present today. This was the high-end trailer. Later on, you will see a walkthrough, which might be a bit more bumpy, but you can see a bit more. And this is what this meeting is about, to see how it came to this point. But first things first, so hello from our side, and thank you for the warm welcome and the invitation, Barbara, and to the colleagues of ZKM. I'm Alina, and I'm from Kunstpalast and NRW Forum, as Barbara already mentioned, and I'm here with my dear colleague Marina from Museum Ulm. And yeah, we are quite different institutions and started Next Museum I/O as a platform in 2020. With a focus on swarm creation and co-creation. And Marina will give some insights into the project and this cross-institutional approach. And then I will continue with the WWW Forum.
Yeah, so thank you. Hello and welcome. There wouldn't be a WWW Forum without Next Museum I/O. So it's my pleasure to give you a short introduction on our project. Let me share the screen. So this webinar is about the next steps towards multidimensional art institution. It's my pleasure to present maybe a first step to that. It's a ready to go tool. So if you like what you see, you're free to start an open call for swarm curation right after this event. It's for free. And we put a lot of thoughts into our platform. So it's offering digital participation in the creation of exhibition to the public. So for us, this is to secure the social relevance of museums in times of digitization, social media, and the fight for more democracy. We address curators. They can start open calls. We address artists. They can submit artworks. And we ask everybody on their opinions, ideas, and their know-how on the exhibition topics so that we can do the projects together. Basically, Next Museum I/O is a platform in the internet. You just tap in our name, then you find everything. But we also have a Telegram chat. we have developed an app, a mediation app, ArtChat. We explored a little bit on WebXR. There's a website where you can test some objects from our museums in WebXR. And finally, we developed the WWW Forum, our metaverse location. It's a cross-institutional digital community platform, so open for everybody, for free curators, for institutions, for people who would like to do collaborative projects. And we are also funded by the Federal Cultural Foundation. This is our homepage. Here you can see what you can get. You can learn more about us. You can start projects for swarm curation. You can see our co-created digital experiments, our events. We did a lot of talks, expert talks and meetups and whatever, and the video screenings are also online. You can also see some exhibitions who were the results of the swarm curation. And of course, you can meet curators. And this is where I hand over to Alina.
Perfect, thank you. I'd like to start with a quote from Charles Bukowski. I really like, artist and co-founder of Arena. And he said that some art needs to be seen at 2 a.m. in your bedroom with 1 million browser tabs open. And we do agree and think that to some extent, digital art needs digital spaces. And I think that we saw that already in the projects by Livia and Duncan, that sometimes it doesn't have to be the white cube, but the opposite of it. So that was our idea at the beginning. And we opened the virtual doors of the WWW Forum at the end of March. And it's a collaboration between Next Museum I/O, the NRW Forum, and the studio Christian Mio Leclerc. And we wanted to create the space beyond the walls of the physical institution and opened a site for experiment, both for artists and visitors, and to explore digital curating, actually. And digital twin is also a word that we heard today already. And we didn't want this. We want rather a 3-dimensional environment with its own architecture landscape and sculpture garden that you can see here already on the picture. And the idea of a forum, both in the sense of digital understanding or analog, is a space for exchange and encounter of people, ideas, and art, and was always central also to the concept and self-conception of the physical space, the NRW Forum. And we wanted to transfer this idea into the digital sphere with this project. And beyond that, there are elements that allude to the physical space. Some who have been in Düsseldorf already might recognize the little Köhlpapagei, so-called. It's a green parrot that lives somehow since the 80s in Düsseldorf. And everyone knows them. And another example is the Fortuna-Bütchen, a beautiful little kiosk next to the Rhine River that you can explore while you're in the WWW Forum. And you can see the physical building. If you haven't been there yet, you should go. And you can see it here on the left-hand side. And as you can see, it's a massive monumental building. It's from 1925-26 and made by the architect Wilhelm Kreis. And you can see that it has like very strict symmetric architecture with those red brick stones and beige sandstone. And inside, if you enter, you can find a rotunda in the center with this round shape. And to left and right, there are some both exhibition wings. And what you can see here, this little green part, it's the Ehrenhof, which continues to the Hofgarten. It's like the city park, which we have in front of the building. And behind it, you have the Rhine River flowing. And on the right-hand side, you can see the WWW Forum. And if you look a little closer, you can see some resemblance, the rotunda in the middle, the large shape, etc. But it's somehow lifted up, flipped over, turned around, and so on. So it's kind of a new space. And this was also a big challenge for the artist studio, they said, because you want to somehow represent the building, but at the other time want to to react to the visitor and to move accordingly, actually. So, for example, if you're in the foyer, it is quite large, larger than it is in real life. And if you walk outside, it will shrink. And it adjusts to your own presence, which we had in Livia's talk before as well. And for others, they can't see it. It's just in your environment, and it will move accordingly to the things you do there, which is, yeah, certainly impossible in real life this way. And yeah, this was completely new to our way of thinking of making an exhibition, but also, of course, the curating and the co-creation between us and the artist studio, who's in charge, who creates a space, because you can't divide it as you do usually, that there's someone for the scenography, for the text and so on. It's all melted together. And yeah, this was quite new to us and exciting. And also that you somehow have a museum without walls, you could say, and or the walls are quite different. They images and sculptures are floating around, and you have kind of a whole new system. And also, what is important to us, putting the visitor experience at first. And with this, we wanted to create an accessible digital space for everyone, with the aim to make people feel comfortable. This is something the artist Christian Mio-Leclerc also aims for, to make people love spend time in the internet. I mean, Duncan, you said 20 minutes. This is very good, right? For the internet, usually you're just like 2 seconds and you're gone, kind of. And we want to slow the people down and have a longer and an aesthetic experience and an experience of encounter, and bring them together and feeling the presence of each other and the presence of the art, somehow the digital aura, you could say. And yeah, as I said, Christian Mio-Leclerc was the architect somehow, but also the first artist. He has his exhibition until Sunday, so you should definitely see it. And yeah, it's called Come Out and Dance, because he's both a dancer and computer scientist, and you will definitely see that melting together. And after that, oh, sorry, Marina, can you skip the next one? Yeah, perfect. And after that, we are going to host 3 virtual residencies that can shape, alternate, and play with the WWW Forum and create a new experience and do some research. And we're very curious about this because it has a special aesthetic, a special look, and we're very interested to see what the new artists will do with this place and how they, yeah, shape it or tear it even down. We don't know. And yeah, the open call is already closed, but you can see the submissions on our website, and you can scroll through it and comment it, because one residency will be decided by us, one by Christian Mio-Leclerc or his studio, and the third one will be decided by the community. So our idea was to create a discussion around the artworks, and that you can comment the artworks, and we will have a meetup to discuss. And this is the part of the Swarm curation we are very excited about as well. And this will be the third residency at the WWW Forum. And yeah, this will open within the next days, the comment section. So just stay tuned and have a look on our website. Yeah, and last but not least, I wanted to give you this little walkthrough. So Andy, if you could share the video, we can see a bit more of WWW Forum. Yeah, this is our website, and you have to click on the Kühlpapageien for sure. Then you enter.
This is our sculpture garden, yours and ours. You'll find a number of unique pieces crafted by Studio Christian Mio-Leclerc. I'll be your guide, Kühlpapageien, hands that dance. But these fingers weren't broken yesterday. Don't think about the bones that make these hands work. Imagine them more as branches chiming in digital wind. Hands in cloth roots.
So you can also see that the sun is traveling while
You
you
can take
move.
it from here, continue inside to see some extra beauty. I'll stay here in the garden with my feathered friends. Ciao, cacao.
Okay. So, hello everyone and welcome to our brand new WWW Forum. Glad that you made it and hope you enjoyed it so far. On the stage is Christian Mio-Leclerc.
So you can move with the map to the different places. This is the workshop area. I would love to have an office there.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us at the new WWW Forum by the NRW Forum Düsseldorf. I am Christian Mio-Leclerc and I'm super proud to be the first artist in residency that was allowed to shape that space and open that space for others to join us. And today I would like to use this workshop room here to discuss with you and share with you our perspectives and why we do this, and actually ask the question, why does the internet need walls? Why does the internet need this space? Why does this internet need this space with art within and with you within? And I would like to go through those discussions and yeah.
A famous Trinkhalle, Fortuna. Okay. So there's more to explore, but I think, yeah, so needs some space to be curious about so you can enter it after this meeting, maybe.
Yeah, super nice. Thank you so much, Alina and Marina. Also, Alina, this space and the soundscape, since this has been a recurring topic, such a nice floating exercise. I really like it. I have a few questions, but I will first leave the space to Klaas to
Hello.
react to. Hi there, Klaas. Thanks so much for being
Hello.
with us. So yeah, you're our respondent for Alina and Marina. I'm super interesting to also know what you thought.
Yeah, thank you very much for this quick run through of your project. There's a lot of interesting concepts there, but I would and some of them that I find very intriguing, but that you didn't get into. So I would like to ask a question about that, because particularly this idea of swarm curation, I find very intriguing. But can you explain how this works? And then I had a related question is like, so what can be curated? Because what you showed us just now were 3D models made by a studio that I think you collaborated with. But the suggestion that you made is that basically, I guess, anything online could be curated and then be brought, but maybe this is not the case. Could you go into that a little bit more?
Shall I start with swarm curation and then you go for the open call? Okay. So we researched a lot on swarm curation. It's made the following way. Curators can publish an open call and explain their plans and ask artists to submit artworks for the exhibition. And we offer different ways of swarm curation. So what we want is that the curators, artists, and the swarm get into discussion with meetups, with little games, with votings, with whatever. It's the decision of the curator how open he or she is for the the participation of the swarm. And in the end, they have to decide. So either you just grab the feedback and input of the swarm and use it for the curation, or you really do a voting or something like that. And then you decide best way together which submissions make it to the exhibition. In the last 3 years, we had over 30 projects over the platform, and I think half of them made it to exhibition. So you can really see what's the output of such a swarm curation process. We're currently working on the new platform with even more ways of doing swarm curation. As I said, we really researched a lot on that topic. And for the WWW Forum, there was also an open call, but not at the beginning of the project. And Alina is going to explain it.
Maybe also to add to your comment, Klaas, we understand our platform a bit as a toolbox. And I think Livia said that at the beginning as well, that we know curators are individuals, they have different needs, and so we need different tools that they can pick, that they can choose and make their exhibitions with the community they want to. And that's how we're working. And in this case, we needed to build the place, this exhibition place with Mio, and he was also the first artist to show what's possible maybe and to experiment on this. And then we have those virtual residencies, and we really see it as a research phase as well, where they can explore and what does it mean to exhibit in the digital realm, how we can place artworks there, how can they evolve, how visitors interact with them. So it's really kind of a research project, and the curation in this part, as I said, it was kind of a co-creation between the studio and us, and it's more like creating the experience of the visitor, how he enters, how he sees the building, how he goes through it. And then, we also, as I explained, we have like someone selected by us, someone selected by the studio, and someone selected by the community. Yeah.
But thanks. I have a lot of kind of related questions, but the first one, because what I saw in your run through was this dynamic 3D objects, soundscapes and videos, and but everything seemed to be made particularly for this exhibition space. So the question I had is also, what other material can you basically derive anything from? Basically, could you use the whole digital sphere as your potential source for curatable material, and then put together an exhibition of whatever you find? And then the related question, of course, is, but what about moderation? Like, then clearly there will be things that are maybe not fully compliant with your ideas of what can and cannot be inside of an exhibition. So these two questions kind of, I mean, the suggestion is radical openness, radical democratic, let's say, flatness, equal access to everybody. At the same time, we all know, and this is, physical space is the same, digital space is the same. It's not the same for everybody. There's bandwidth issue, technological issues, but there's also a lot of political sensitivities. I'm just only thinking about Documenta recently, but let's not go there for now. But so there's a tension. We all know this. There's a tension between radical openness and what can and cannot happen. So I wonder how you think about this.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree. Actually, we're going to find out because it's just coming up. And we're also working with Unreal 5 as engine. And basically, it's like a 3D CMS also. It's kind of a content management system where you can upload 3D files, basically, or the artworks. So if you take Manuel Rosner as an artist, you could do his swooshes and stuff and upload it in there. But that would be, a little bit too easy, right? So the idea is to shape this place as well. We will see how that will happen. I mean, the building could be teared down or something, but the shape or the transparency could be changed, but it's also maybe some technical limitations. I don't know, like they really have to know 3D or Unreal as a system. But I will tell you when we find out. I hope that's okay as an answer.
Sure. I'm curious how you think about this, because I mean these issues always come up. So
yeah.
And this it's and have we all tried to learn from previous approaches? So I just wonder where you were taking it. I had one other question before maybe we go to the moderator. Would this be something in which you also invite other institutions to collaborate?
Yeah, that would be the next step, maybe then. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
But it's also interesting, right? Because I mean, it's in the digital realm, so there's no institution in that sense or no place, but it is somehow resembles our place. But it could be interesting for a collaboration for sure. Yeah.
I think the question, or at least the question, came up when you said you're also open to really redesign the space. So well, you can make all kinds of hybrids between various spaces and come up with entirely new spaces which do not belong to any other physical institution, but become this new shared space. I mean, that's what kind of suggested this approach. So, but
yeah, I mean, as we are Next Museum IO, a cross-institutional platform, anyone can do an open call. Why not do an open call at WWW Forum if it's available? So for this year, it's quite booked out, I can say. We have those residencies, and we're also planning a kind of hybrid exhibition, but it's very not clear right now. But after that, we're open for any collaborations.
Thanks.
When we started Next Museum IO, it was always the question, what will be our exhibition space? Next Museum IO was considered sometimes as a museum, and everybody was asking, so, okay, what are you going to build in the end? And so this is the answer. Next Museum IO is more a philosophy, not a building. But after thinking it over and considering different virtual museums, it's the WWW Forum finally, where we will use all we have learned on swarm curation, on participation, and on hybrid. That's a logical consequence.
Thanks. Yeah.
So you will also use Next Museum IO as a tool to curate exhibitions within the WWW Forum? Is that like a link that is very natural, or will you do the swarm curation like for WWW Forum on a separate platform or on WWW Forum?
No, there's a connection. I mean, we did the open call on this, and we're expanding our toolbox at the moment. So this is connected for sure, yeah.
But it would be interesting if a freelance curator would ask if he or she could have the WWW Forum for an exhibition connected to an open call. The person would start on Next Museum IO.
Yes, that was actually my thought as well, because I think the interesting part is that Next Museum IO happened way before the pandemic and way before, there was this need for virtual or digital exhibition spaces that really came from this new normal reality, right? So I think it now just goes beautifully hand in hand. And there's, I think in the first webinar, we saw New Art City from a project from Don Hansen, who also permits or built a platform for people to curate their own digital exhibition. And there it's participatory in the sense that if you have a project, you can just go for it and build your own digital exhibition. But the interesting thing is, in your link with Next Museum IO as a method, you just invite people to build a community to then decide with the community what artworks or what topic should be part of the exhibition. And then you can now also do a digital exhibition, which is super nice. So yeah, really lovely development. There's two questions in the chat. Hang on. The first one is, do you think the platform will have many recurring visitors?
I hope so. I mean, I know regarding the time spent there, Duncan, you guys are a bit better than us, but we are still good. I would say it's, I think, average time 7 minutes, and usually it's like 3. So on other spaces and recurring, I mean, I know some people that are coming back, and I hope especially when we have new programs. So we try to have something new all the time, right? So I hope people will come back for this.
and there's a workshop space. So it depends on what the artists use for their exhibitions, what we can offer. Personally, I can say when you enter the WWW Forum first, you're so busy with running through the world and discovering and being an avatar, and it's all so funky. You will definitely have to come back to see some objects of the exhibition. So we have twice, that's for sure. And then it depends if you like to spend time in the internet.
Yeah, which is also kind of the question that you asked before, you know, who is a specific project for, right? There's a last question in the chat. Can an artist curate an exhibition or open a call as well?
Okay, I picked that. Anyone can be a curator. This is, the moment you start a project, and to be honest, we had students who started an open call for a magazine. Of course, they are curator of their project. To be a curator, you better have a space, because who would submit if you can't offer anything? So the project won't be very successful if you have nothing to offer to artists. If you read through our open calls that are published on the website, you see they are describing a concept, they are open for new ideas, but they know when and they know where, and they kind of know what kind of art they are searching for, and then the process starts. But basically, anyone can be a curator for a project on Next Museum.io.
All right. Well, thank you. That was a very good last word. Or Klaas, do you have an additional question? Go ahead.
Yeah, one. I thought this was also interesting that you offered a production fee of a. I mean, I saw it very briefly pass by. So this is production fee for an exhibition, right?
It's for this virtual residency, yeah.
Oh, sorry, this was a virtual residency. Right, okay, yeah. So it's not, there's no production fee attached to producing exhibitions or...
we do it, sorry.
No.
I mean, as a platform, cross-institutional, we can't say other institutions what they have to do. I mean, we have a code of conduct, but as us, we try to provide these fees for sure for the artists participating.
Very nice, yeah.
If you register on Next Museum.io and start an open call, we guide you through a form and we ask you, what do you offer the swarm for the swarm curation work? And that could be that hasn't been money, that can also be primary access to something or a publication or whatever. But we ask for rewards, and we also ask for what do you offer to the artists. We really work on that issue that is discussed widely, that artists have to receive money for their work. We try
Fantastic,
to
we
try to do
support
something.
this. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, great.
Yeah, thanks so much, dear Alina and Marina. And really looking forward to, first of all, visiting the exhibition that is still running, but then also seeing the difference, right? Like a lot of the questions that you asked, Klaas, were also in my head, you know, what will the space look like when somebody else has shaped it and taken it? And so thanks so much. And from here, thank you. And we will now turn to our next presentation. From you, dear Klaas, and I'm so looking forward to the project that you will present today, because I remember 2 years ago you were already part of the ZKM Assembly toward Permacircular Museums, and I mean, you are the initiator of the Het Nieuwe Institute as ZORB and the Zoonomic Institute, and you work at an intersection which I think is so interesting, the intersection of culture, technology, and ecology. And in the beginning, I said metaverse is the most romantic term of the current internet debate. But I think the term that you are bringing to the table today might claim that title because we will talk about questions of perma-computing. And I can't wait to learn about that term. So thanks so much for being with us. And take it away.
Thank you very much for this lovely introduction. I hope it's recorded. I would like to use it again. I want to share
anytime, Klaas. Anytime.
Share. Here I go. our new home, our new visual identity only launched a month ago. Het Nieuwe Instituut. We're actually now called Nieuwe Instituut without het. My name is Klaas Kuitenbrouwer. I'm senior researcher, and I used to be senior researcher in digital cultures, but I moved to regenerative practices. This is my new focus point. It still involves computing and approaches to computing, but the focus is regenerative practice. Of course, this is a major urgency in the background that we all know of, and this is also the reason for my shift. This is our building. It's 1985. It was built by Jo Koenen, very modernist, very function division, very wide spaces, a bit like the shoulder fillings that you used to have in the 80s fashion. This is the office tower to the right. Behind the affiches here is the exhibition building. To the left, what you see, the extended kind of building in the background is the archive building. We're also the National Archive of Urban Planning and Architecture. Not on the picture are the ponds and the gardens, which through becoming a zoo have become, us becoming a zoo, and I'll get into that, have become major parts of our actual museum site, our museum practice. So we're the National Museum for Architecture, Design and Digital Culture. Rotterdam, I said that. Exhibition, shop, cafe, educational spaces, and majorly a garden. And very much this collection also, this National Archive of Urban Planning and Architecture. And originally the building was the Architecture Museum, the National Institute for Architecture, but about 12 years ago, it became Het Nieuwe Instituut. And this was the moment it was merged with organizations for digital culture and organizations for design. And since that, we in a way abandoned, you could say, the single focus on a particular discipline, namely that of architecture. But by being able to combine different design disciplines and the kind of the knowledge practices of these different design disciplines, our shift also focused. We no longer kind of work from these separate ways of doing things, but kind of move into a more integrated way. So the focus becomes basically big societal questions that can be addressed through different kinds of knowledge practices, through the knowledge practice of architecture, the spatial questions, through the knowledge practices of design, which have to do with anything from the interior to social practice to material use, but always somehow on the scale of the human body, through questions that come from digital cultures that have to do with computation, with networks, with distributed, have global access to single points, and all these things that come from digital cultures. Okay, so around nearly 5 years ago, the word ZOOP emerged in workshops that I helped set up. What is the ZOOP? It's actually, ZOOP Het Nieuwe Instituut is obviously the same place, but through a slightly different perspective. It's namely through the perspective of the way we participate in ecological relations. The background, so ZOOP is an organization model. Actually, the word is short for zooperation, cooperation with zoe, the Greek word for life. So it's basically an organization that has become a ZOOP, has added a particular perspective and a particular practice to its established practice, namely to look at its practice through the eyes of the needs, the interests of other than human life. So we're no longer just a museum for humans or an exhibition space for humans or an educational practice for humans. With everything we do, we always also take into account the interests of other than human life and the effects that our presentations, our exhibitions, our actions, our operations have either locally or on remote places on the lives of other bodies than human bodies. To be a ZOOP is not something you just do and then you're done. It's fundamentally a learning process, and it starts with observing the way you exist, observing the way you participate in ecological relationships, and then identifying the quality of these relationships. So do they actually sustain humans only, or have particular human focused practice, or actually a practice that only is focused on a limited group of humans? but also questioning whether these practices actually support other life elsewhere in this whole network of relations. And this observation is key. This is the basis of everything you do through the lens of a ZOOP. And then the learning process is not only to identifying these relations, but also to see, once you identify certain of these relations as degenerative, meaning reducing the life carrying capacity of the planet at particular other places in your relationships, and to transform them into regenerative ones, which basically means something that increases the life carrying capacity of the planet. If we don't, I'm sorry if you weren't up to speed with this, we're pretty much doomed. Regeneration is the only logical kind of type of endeavor. Sustainability, this default sustainability thinking ignores the fact that our atmosphere is already saturated with CO2 to an extent that will melt the ice caps anyway, even if miraculously all organizations start doing zero emissions from tomorrow, which of course they won't. But even if they did, it's still only a kind of, let's say, a slight prolongation of the decay that we're already engaged in. So ZOOP will not solve this, but ZOOP will be an effort to do the work of repair. So if within 50 years there will be something like a recognizable biosphere, it will be by doing things like ZOOP, not necessarily ZOOP only, but by engaging with ecological regeneration. This is essential. So it's a model that can be adopted by all organizations, for-profit and not-for-profit. And importantly, you're not a ZOOP on your own, but you share knowledge with other ZOOPs about the issues you face. And a lot of these issues are obviously design issues. So this is also how ZOOP sits at the heart of our disciplinary focuses. So we became a ZOOP in only last year, but the model was developed by the NIWI Institute over the last 5 years. I talked about it in the ZKM about 2 years ago. The rest is not so important for now, but basically it's important to know that a ZOOP is something that can be adopted by many organizations. The model can be adopted by many organizations, and there is an organization, namely the Zoonomic Institute, that would help you to become a ZOOP. So this is not the NIWI Institute, which is itself a ZOOP. There's another body, the Zoonomic Institute, that helps organizations to become ZOOPs. So why? The climate crisis, I won't go into again, it's not looking good, but it's extremely hard to, even if you know what should be done, to actually get there, to start doing it. It's where all our systems are geared toward a different logic. Our financial, economic, conceptual systems are geared towards a different logic. So all we can, let's say, hope for is that we are able to learn. So ZOOP is basically a learning process. And that started for us about a year ago. This is the inauguration of ZOOP at NIWI Institute. This is our board on the right. Eric Chan, Josine Paulides. These are 2 people of the Zoonomic Institute I just introduced. And this is our speaker for the living. This is a crucial role in the ZOOP. This is the person that kind of catalyzes this learning process. It's a person that has one task only, namely to articulate the interests of other than human life within the questions, within the issues that we work with. So this is her job. This is Maaike van Stiphout, nature inclusive landscape architect, who also knows the design practice very well. And she basically advises us on how to integrate these interests of other than human life. And by the virtue of her being part of our organization, this view, this kind of this attitude of being able to also care for the needs of other bodies than just human bodies has kind of spread. And it's very hopeful to see that once you put on these glasses, they cannot come off anymore. Once you begin to look at what you do as kind of participating in ecological relations, you cannot go back. So this is actually the main gist of my talk now. So what does a ZOOP say of computation? And here I'm taking, oops, I realized that my computer is actually going down. It's because, oh dear, the electricity is not working in this place. So I hope I'm going to make it. This is a bit worrying. So I'm going to take a little bit of an outside view on the idea of the virtual museum, and I'm going to look at it as a quite kind of material and electricity, energy intensive mode of computation that will have a problematic role to play. I see another wall socket here, but I cannot reach it from where I'm sitting. Damn it. A role to play in that has a role, that plays a role in the accelerating of the climate crisis. So we should figure out a way to do it. So I found this term permacomputing, coined by artist programmer Ville Matthias Heikkila, as known as Visnut, who's actually a demo scene artist also. And he coined this term in 2022. And it's actually, obviously, a portmanteau of permaculture, so an agriculture that sustains all life and that can be permanently, that is not degenerative, and computing. And the idea of permacomputing is that it would look at computing as justified if it can contribute to ecological regeneration. And if it isn't, we have to find a way to do it, how to figure out how to do it. So this applies to virtuality, but a little bit from the outside. It focuses on the material and energy dimensions of computing, efficient coding. Think of the demo scene. That is this kind of sport to make the most efficient programs on the least amount of CPUs and hardware. It focuses on reuse of components and on modular designs. It also looks at the cultures required to be able to do that focus. So do not count on Moore's law to give us ever expanding bandwidth and ever expanding speeds, but try to reduce your needs and kind of decouple computing from Moore's law logic, to work with appropriate logic. So what is the minimum requirements instead of what is the maximum that we can use, and why not use it because it's already there. And it focuses on putting together or establishing commons for hardware and code base. Of course, this is what the open source movement already did, but the hardware bit is maybe a little bit less developed. From the perspective of ecological regeneration, I would like to add that also another kind of logic needs to be established here, and that has to do with the particular, the established default outputs of computing. And it's not just enough to look at the material and energy needs, but also at what computing does to the world and to worldviews, to make everything computable. And from the perspective of ecologies, not everything is computable. And there's other kinds of complexities and other kinds of bodily experiences that escape computability at the moment, but they need to be taken into account, and they cannot approach, certainly not directly through computing or computability. So permacomputing is not officially embraced by Zoop and Nieuwe Instituut, but on the other hand, we have done several projects that align beautifully with this effort. So I'm going to go quickly through 3 of them that address material and energy needs, that address a culture, but also that address a kind of the worldview of computing. So this is an important initiative to really analyze and really fundamentally restructure the impact of our digital curation, our digital heritage practice, which is very software intensive, very cloud intensive in a lot of ways, very there's a lot of high resolution scanning involved, and the disclosing, the opening up of these digital archives all over the through digital means, so that they are accessible from all over the world, takes up a lot of bandwidth and material. So this is a quick analysis of what this means in terms of CO2, and also a prediction that as archives become more digital, the energy impact of archiving increases, and this is already happening right now. 37% of the environmental impact of archiving comes through the digital maze, and it comes through the digital aspect, and this will only increase. Another interesting heritage practice that came up through the Zoop, it's not directly involved with computing, but it does from the side impact it again, is like to look at curated decay. So curated decay is basically a concept that includes a certain logic of our decay into archiving. It basically says maybe it is not necessary to always preserve everything in its original state. Maybe certain forms of decay are allowed for. can be taken into account. In film restoration, this is already kind of standing practice. New copies of films often also include artifacts of previous runs, are not fully erased, but in architecture, this is not a practice. But it will involve, obviously, also kind of the impacts of living bodies. So forms of rot, maybe mycelia. This is maybe a radical proposal. I don't think we will accept it, but this is the famous silverfish which eats paper. So if once you have these in your paper archive, you're pretty much doomed as archive. Natural enemies of the silverfish are spiders. Okay, the silverfish is a radical example. We won't probably go into actually sustaining silverfish, but we might allow for a little bit of mycelial activity in the archive, and basically allow the show of wear and tear and the show of age of paper as something that is allowed for in an archive. The same might go for digital systems. Like maybe it's okay for certain hardwares to become obsolete, and we can take them apart, reuse parts, and figure out new things. On the other hand, if we want to keep accessibility on top, we need to be building very kind of platform independent, backward compatible systems. And this is also a new challenge. It's not the new, but it's really look at the past of computing. Very interesting challenge that will come back at the end of my presentation if my battery holds. The concept of curated decay was developed by Kathleen De Silva in her book by 2017. So I don't want to take credit for it, but there you go. So a second practice that we, this is a commission that we did, kind of a collaboration also with a group of art science students and with curator Erik Kluitenberg, well known for his kind of initiating role in the Next 5 Minutes conferences back in the day of the utopian phase of the internet, in the Netherlands at least. The data fusion instrument is a way to apply computational practices to the question of questions of ecology, but while acknowledging that computation itself will not give us the particular kind of the particular knowledge that we're looking for. So it took a very interesting approach. It said, like, ecologies are systems of many different relations with many different viewpoints and many different bodies that all interrelate. So the data fusion instrument is basically a very dense collection of about 25 different ways to register a small plot of land, basically the garden of het Nieuwe Instituut. There's a pollen counter, there's a weather station, there's a pH, so acidity measurement. There's a night camera that registers nightly visits of bats, and so a nightly thermal camera that registers nightly visits of bats and rabbits, but of course also humans, and various other things. And it basically tried to make time signatures of our garden. So it did not look at how do these kind of chemical exchanges or this one causal effects, but basically it tried to find out rhythms of the in our garden. And importantly, it also tried not to kind of resolve the differences between these different computational practices. It said they're all slightly different in a way, like ecologies also function from slightly different viewpoints. That basically tried to accept the diversity of digital viewpoints and make some kind of collage emergent image representation of our garden through time signatures. So this is another one. This is point cloud animations. Basically, we did an exhibition that was part of the Milan Triennial last year, which incidentally won an award. But the data fusion instrument was there. This was an exhibition about the ZOOP. So this is a way, the data fusion instrument is a way to, in a way, find a compromise between the natural, if you can call it that, tendencies of computing to do quantitative approaches, and a way to kind of find a compromise with the particular qualities of ecosystems. So it's a kind of a hybrid form. And the third project I would like to call your attention to is was also part of this exhibition. This is a long-standing collaboration. This does several things that permacomputing does, so it's particularly interesting. Not only is this a neural net, an AI that runs on extremely little hardware, and with extremely little energy needs. It's very well programmed and does only what it needs to do and nothing else. It's basically a CCTV camera observing its surroundings, connected to an unsupervised learning neural net, an unsupervised learning AI. That basically means that the AI does not have any preconceived knowledge about the ecologies, even about whatever it sees, and it has the ability to categorize its observations, but only after it exposed itself to a series of observations. So it starts from a blank slate, from complete scratch, and it slowly builds up a catalog of different kinds of things it observes. And because it is such a, in a way, artificially naive system, so this is not an artificially intelligent system, but this is artificial naivety, it categorizes its observations in ways that humans would not categorize these observations. So it comes up with all kinds of correlations and relations that we wouldn't naturally be able to figure out why these are kind of correlations. Like, has it to do with the color blue and the moving sun? Is it the movement of a leaf? Is it the simultaneous quality of water sparkling of the light? And I mean, there could be all kinds of relationships why things get categorized in different clusters of observations. That's what you see on the left side, these clusters. It also gives, it also gives each clusters its own name. I don't know where this is going. I can't switch it. Yeah, there we are. Yes. It gives these clusters its own name, and these names have nothing to do with, they're basically character strings, and they are more or less readable, but they're not really kind of pertain to any particular existing logic. So what this Deep Steward does, next to being very energy efficient, next to being very materially efficient, it opens up perspectives on things that we thought we knew from completely novel angles. And it allows us to ask questions to our observations that we would not be able to ask ourselves. So it's a completely kind of other approach than the famous biased AIs. It's actually a way to use the naivety of AIs to help us find questions that we would not be able to ask ourselves, because we already know things, we already categorize our observations, and we already know that water is not the same as sunlight and that the leaf is not the same thing as a bird, but this thing doesn't. And it allows it to find, this allows it to find kind of ways to see that are unavailable to us if we only stick to what we think we know. So I think this is a particular interesting approach to the question of permacomputing, and we would have used the word if we already had it, but in retrospect, it's a very valid entry point in the permacomputing catalog. Lastly, I would like to point out to this is not actually permacomputing, but okay, maybe it's permacomputing through the lens of archiving. This is our upcoming exhibition. Would be interesting for many of you who are here. This opens in October 2023. It's a revisit of 20 famous 20th century digital artworks made in the Netherlands by in the heyday of digital culture in the Netherlands. This is an image from The Living, an early live online avatar project by Deborah Solomon. This was before YouTube, before before the net as we know it existed, before social media. All of these things still had to be invented, and her intuitions pointed to a lot of things that are completely common by now, but were completely novel back then. And it looks back at those practices and the way they had the suggestions they make for the questions of computing and digital culture today. Jeffrey Shaw's included Points of View, one of the first virtual, actual virtual reality kind of approaches. Also interesting in the context of the virtual museum. And it will be very interesting, and we will, in the public program, also address this question of, well, maybe not under the word permacomputing, but at least the material and energy needs of computing and the way to archive digital works. This is one of the core questions of the project. And to do this in a manner that will not harm our planet in a fundamental way as it has been doing so far. So I want to stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, dear Klaas, and happy your laptop is still with us.
I'm still with you. Yeah.
Amazing. I would actually quite directly open the floor also to Julian Stahl and Teresa Darian, who are the respondents to you. And yeah, if I don't know if both of you want to speak or just one of you, I'm not sure. But yeah, whatever you feel happy and comfortable with.
Julian wants to speak.
Yeah, I can start.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you very much for the really, really interesting talk. I really enjoyed the ideas and the concepts, also because I just recently started reading James Bridle's Ways of Being, and I saw many parallels to your concepts. So I'm very curious about the Zoop concept, and perhaps it's a bit abstract, but I was wondering, how do you start switching perspectives from observing the world as human with human knowledge lenses to observing the world with a non-human knowledge lens? How can this work?
Yeah, there's many different answers to that question. Some viewpoints are fundamentally inaccessible, and we will never be able to really experience the world like an earthworm will. This is obvious, and there's no point in pretending that we can. On the other hand, there are very fundamental similarities, which really give a very kind of workable entry point, is that everything that lives needs a place to live, needs food, needs a chance at procreation, and perhaps prefers to have choice in all of the above. And if you look at like that, that's almost like Maslow's pyramid, and it's very similar for humans. It's not that abstract at all. It's extremely concrete and extremely accessible. And to realize this is not a complicated abstract move. It's a very kind of it's a move of solidarity, of empathy. And of course it involves knowledge, but it does not involve knowledge about what does this particular earthworm want at this particular moment, giving several options. That this is inaccessible, but it basically observes knowledge about how can I give it space to make its own choices. And this is way less abstract. So, and this is, yeah, in a way, my general answer. So the job of a zoop is not so much to know exactly what every nematode and bacterium and viral body, whatever, wants at any given moment, but it's to find ways to give space so these bodies can express themselves, and we can find ways to relate to it. And so in our view, all bodies already have voices. It's not about giving voice. These bodies have very different realms. Some are sonic, some are chemical, some are spatial. There are all kinds of different dimensions to these voices, and a lot of them can be observed and can be related to, and they're not symbolic language. Some are actually, a surprisingly amount are actually symbolic language, much more than we thought. But a lot of them are not symbolic, are very kind of direct and material ones. And yeah, you can find ways to relate to these. And this is not necessarily abstract knowledge, but it's opening up to experiences. Hope that kind of gives an answer. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
And perhaps one second question for also perhaps less advanced institutions and museums. You think about how to start engaging with permacomputing. Do you have any ideas or hints where to start?
I didn't go into that. It takes me at least half an hour to do it any justice. But the basic move of a zoop is to enter this learning process, and this learning process is about asking yourself, what ecological relations are you in? This involves a lot of research. I mean, but it's not a complicated thing to start. So to realize that your institution is a collective of many other bodies, that all of them participate in ecosystems, that your building does things, that your digital systems do things, maybe not on the spot, but also on the other end of the planet, where the lithium for your iPhone batteries or your smartphone batteries has come from the Atacama Desert, where local ecosystems are kind of under a lot of threat. All these things are, yeah, you can with common sense you can come quite a bit, quite somewhere. And to realize that this is what you do, this is not something that happens to you, but it's actually something that is also within your agency to potentially change a bit, is where it starts. And then you can identify what you think is the most important and what is the most urgent to change. And then, step by step, I mean, what else can you do? You cannot change everything at once, but you can start somewhere by identifying what is most urgent and what is most urgent thing most within your organizational capacity, and start there. And then CO2 emissions is usually a thing that you can work with. Of course, mobility is a thing you can work with, but you can also think of increasing the life carrying capacity of your building and your grounds. This is also very visual. It's also very kind of audience. It talks to your audience directly. This is something we do a lot. Also, the current exhibition that opened today does this to a very profound extent. These are all things that you can do. And not everything of that is also extremely expensive. Actually, a lot of it also saves you costs. Rewilding your garden rather than mowing it all the time is not very expensive move. Just allowing others to make choices there rather than making your own choices. It's very cheap, very effective.
Thank you so much. Very inspiring.
Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks also for your questions, dear Julian. And I think we'll leave it at that also with time-wise. But yeah, Klaas, thanks so much. And also for grounding us again in the fact that, you know, any kind of,
thank you.
Yes, any kind of digital or virtual project, of course, will carry the question of carbon footprint and emissions and electricity with it. So something that, you know, should actually be part of the discourse, should have been from the beginning. Yeah. So thanks a lot.
Reiterating that, but that's indeed my point. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks a lot for bringing this to the table.
Thank you.
And with that, I think we can beautifully actually go to our last presentation of today with Teresa Darian and Julian Stahl, who you will bring actually a kind of a new perspective also to the table, since now we're leaving the project-based or institution-based perspective and we're going to the funders or the funding side. Since you are speaking from the KSB, the Kulturstiftung des Bundes, which translates, for those who don't know it, to the German Federal Cultural Foundation. And it's one of the largest publicly funded cultural foundations in Europe, actually. And it's what is really interesting also after this talk by Klaas is that some of the projects and the funds that the KSB established directly targets societal issues and societal questions. So you've had the Dive In Fund, which we will hear about, so focusing on digital questions, but also the Fond Zero, which is looking, you know, trying to help cultural institutions, for example, establish their climate, climate plan, or supporting artistic endeavors, cultural endeavors that take these questions into consideration. So with this, I think I will just directly pass on to Teresa and Julian, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. And they're both of us because we are together in charge of the program Dive In. I'm Teresa. I'm responsible for education and mediation in our foundation, and Julian, my colleague, is here because he's responsible for digitality as cultural practice. And as Barbara already said, the Cultural Foundation promotes arts and culture within the scope of the federal government's competence, but also we develop programs on socially relevant issues, and that's why we are here to tell you something about the program Dive In. And we developed this program because the pandemic kept us busy as well as everybody in the world. And it was really hard to see that all cultural institutions were closed and almost no cultural institution had digital channels or tools or formats to stay in touch with their own audience. That was the point of a starting point to develop the program, and that was the reason for us to develop the program Dive In. It was a special funding from the government, and we developed this program and could give the money to the institutions. We wanted to encourage cultural institutions to develop digital projects projects and formats to enable new ways of exchange and interaction with the audience. That was our goal. And it was a big range of opportunities they could apply with games, virtual reality, or augmented reality applications, motion captures, citizen science, interactive websites, and so on. It was there was no end of opportunities, but it was necessary that all projects has interacting modules with the audience. Some facts about the program, as you see already in the screen, it's already finished. Unfortunately, we could fund 200 projects with an amount of 31 million euros. It was this special Corona funding of the government. And for us, it was a special moment that we could open this fund for all institutions, as well as memorials and small associations, festivals, and so on. And that's why we had a big range of projects, very small and very, very big institutions with projects in our fund. And this compilation was in the end very interesting for us. We could offer all projects further training and process support during the funding. That was very important because most cultural institutions were very much at the beginning in their experiences with digital tools and partners in digital world. And in addition, we took up the topics of the program we found in the projects and organized something like Twitter Spaces and discourse events. Topics were, for example, memorial culture and digital space. Do we need new ethics or new role models in cultural institutions through this new digital formats? That was the program we could support. We would provide to support all institutions during the funding. A little conclusion. There was one disadvantage of the program that we couldn't change. That was the duration of the projects. We could give them only 1 year, and that was really, really not enough. So at the end, we can say it was a goal. The goal of the program was to give them the opportunity to make first experiences, some experiments, and so on, and that figured out they could start something, but it's not enough time to develop big digital tools or something like this for the institutions. But now we have this 200 tools and apps and so on in the world, and sometimes we are very surprised where we can encounter them everywhere. Julian, I give a pass to you. You can start with some examples of the program.
Yeah, thank you very much. After this overview of the Dive-In program, I would like to talk about some specific projects that we have funded in this context and that are in some way, at least, connected to aspects of a metaverse. From my perspective, the term metaverse seems to be so attractive and so innovative and so compelling that sometimes I would say a really serious thinking about what it means to build something like a metaverse falls short. And so why I'm saying this, because I really like the concepts and ideas which are mentioned in the event announcement, which says the idea of a metaverse that has the potential to interconnect a wide variety of digital fields of activity and allow physical and virtual realities to converge ever further. And in this very brief description, I would like to highlight two aspects that I think we need to think through when experimenting with metaverse ideas. The first one is the hybrid concept of space, and the second is the social practices and interactions in hybrid spaces. And I would like to illustrate very briefly these two aspects with some examples of projects we have funded in the program. And these are not projects in the narrow understanding of the metaverse, but they can, I would say, be understood as prototypes for the two aspects mentioned before. So in the concept of hybrid space, now I have to find the slides here, is the first one a project by the German Architecture Museum in Frankfurt, which is called Wohnregion. And where Minecraft was used by mainly young participants to experiment with real-world challenges in their neighborhoods. So the structure of the analog city or their neighborhoods was abstracted in the digital world of Minecraft. And I think this can give you a first idea of how hybrid concepts of analog and digital worlds come together in something like virtual worlds. In this aspect here, it's Minecraft. A second project is the project Infinity Archive by the Bauhaus Archive in Berlin. And it's a really impressive, very small room in the temporary space of the archive, where you can search the digitized parts of the archive, thousands of documents and images, by colors and shapes. And what it does, that it gives you a feeling or some kind of understanding of the digital archive in very spatial and immersive way. So it's the other way around. You are in the physical place and get a very spatial understanding of the digital archive. And a third project for the first aspect is the so-called Studio Digital, a project by Kunstmuseum Wolfsburg, which is also a great example, I think, of connecting different spatial concepts. The idea of the project is to connect the museum's exhibition with digital users in a very playful way and to use it in the context of education. To do this, there's a very intuitive interface that allows the artworks to be experienced and connects them to educational offerings. It's worth to play with it on the website. And so on the one hand, you have the museum as a physical location in Wolfsburg, and on the other hand, you have the digital platform, which in turn is used from very different physical locations. And I think here again, it becomes clear how complex the interconnections of hybrid spaces can quickly become. And I would say it's worth thinking about this very carefully in advance and experimenting with the possibilities of these concepts as prototypes for thinking about metaverse ideas. And for the second aspect, thinking about the social interactions in hybrid spaces, I brought two projects. The first one is the Collaboratory by Lehnbach House in Munich. And it was an experimental space for exchange and interaction during the pandemic. And there was a lot of experimentation with how interactions change in the digital hybrid space and how it differs from previous analog forms of interaction. And I think the project shows really well how important it is to give to find a space for experimentation and to try different ideas and then decide what you want to do with it. And the second project is the so-called Digitale Burg or Digital Castle by the Burg Hülshoff Center for Literature. And it is also an experimental space for new ways of thinking about art institutions in the virtual world. And it combines spaces for multimedia content, digital exhibitions and workshop spaces, and aims to be an experimental space where audiences can gather and exchange, look and listen together, and also work and think. And I really like the ideas of coming together there and work together also for translations, for example. And in the previous presentations, we have already seen very complex ideas around the metaverse in the very different institutions. And I think the project of Dive In can give an insight into how fundamental concepts of space, interaction, and hybrid settings are also being tested across the wide variety of different institutions and at very different levels of complexity, and how even in projects that are not obviously understood as metaverse, there's experimentation with many ideas of digitality as cultural practice and not just as a technological process. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks also, which was really nice. You kind of brought us back to the beginning of this webinar series with the collaboratory project. We hosted them here as part of our first webinar series. Also looking specifically at one of the aspects that you pointed out, you know, the social aspect in these projects. So thanks a lot for putting that back on the line. And I think I will just quickly pass on to Livia for a quick reaction or response or questions or whatever. Thanks so much, Livia.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation. And indeed, you have already started to articulate the possible next steps. So, I mean, throughout the pandemic, most of the institutions were quite obsessively looking for answers, how to displace themselves and how to make themselves online completely. And now after the pandemic, it seems to be a more crucial question, how to reach a hybrid state of mind, or how to share content and mediate art through hybrid means between the real and the virtual. And as you have already mentioned, so hybridity is quite a key word. But how do you see its further developments, and how will you react to these developments as a funding body of institutions?
So perhaps I can start. I think the first step is really to take a step back and now look at these very, very different projects and to think about what can we learn from many steps during the pandemic. And we thought about, I think it was a workshop this week or last week, we thought about the question how much digitality is really necessary, which I would say is also an important question, also to connect it with the ideas of regenerative technology and permacomputing. And I would say that the next step for us is to think about how can we think about the concept of digitality and technology and human interaction in all of our programs, if not in one specific program for digitality.
Yeah. And for us, it was a special situation as well, because this 30 million on top, that's not usual for us. So we also have to think about to work with our usual budget. We have 35 or 40 million a year. But now we have to think about new programs. And of course, digitalization gets a push in the pandemic years. So we start to think about it in a big think tank. In the end of the program, Dive In, we go close in a circle to think about what new questions are important for next funding programs and so on. We also had this big Kultur Digital Fund, and but it's also in the end. So it's a good moment to think about new programs.
Okay, great. So we are looking forward to the new programs from an institutional perspective, and maybe I would ask another question, which has already been also answered, but sustainability seems to be another keyword on many levels, not just in relation, so like bringing together computation and its impact on the environment, but also the sustainability of such art mediation and archival practices that are these are big infrastructural questions on many levels. So whether we discuss the ecological footprint of museums or whether we discuss the sustainability of such hybrid and digital practices that seem to be on the one hand necessary. On the other hand, we are talking about their negative impact on the environment. So I'm a little bit perplexed myself, I have to say, and I don't know what's your take on this double-edged sword.
Yeah, I think this is, of course, one of the big questions of our time, I would say. And we had this discussion in one of our so-called holo talks. It was a webinar series in the dive-in context. And we had 3 experts discussing the connection between sustainability and digital transformation. And it was interesting to see how different the perspective can be on this. If you're more looking at it from the practitioner's side or the political side. And one aspect I think was really interesting in this holo talk was the role of big art institutions, which I would say could perhaps be some kind of role models for smaller museums or smaller institutions, and try things and then share their knowledge with other institutions, like today.
And we figured out there's a lack of knowledge for sustainability and digital issues. We also have big programs, as Barbara mentioned, Fong Zero, but it's about sustainability and aesthetics and exhibitions and so on. But this is not connected with our digital programs. So this is a step for us we have to take to connect these topics.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think that's kind of an interesting, we're now approaching the end of our webinar. For me, this is kind of an interesting takeaway or an interesting learning from today's session, is to, just like you said, kind of get even more holistic in the way we think about multidimensional institutions and the metaverse. Which, Livia, if you'll allow me, I have one additional or last question to Teresa and Julian, because obviously the KSB is funded upon the resolution of the German Bundestag. So really closely linked with cultural policies also. And I'm just wondering how the term of the metaverse is being discussed there. Is it at all being discussed, do you know? Or do you get sometimes, when you get allocated extra funds, is there kind of a mission statement that goes with it? Metaverse in our eyes is the future of, I don't know. Is that how it works, or is the metaverse maybe as a term not yet being discussed at the moment in cultural policy?
I don't know. I haven't heard this term in the politics. Not yet.
Okay, me neither. So I don't know. Marina, I don't know, go ahead.
Yeah, I love your face, Teresa. Speaks out loud. Yeah, I just wanted to contribute that at the last Republica, I came across a guy called Tante. I don't know if anybody knows him. He actually works in the art and computing field, and he's advising the Bundestag. There was a spectacular meeting last year, I think, in autumn, when it was on metaverse, crypto, stuff like that. And yeah, if you want to research that, I can really recommend that. Yeah, his name on Twitter and maybe also on YouTube is Tante, and you will surely find links to publications and to what he what he is recommending to the Bundesregierung.
Cool.
I tried to find a link in the time left. I searched.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And Tante, you can really tell these one names. I think he was one of them. It must have been one of the first users online. Yeah, but thank you very much, Marina, for this info. And thank you, Teresa and Julian, for, still all these insights into your programs and also formulating a very important next step. So we are really at the last 5 minutes, I think, of our webinar today. I don't know if anyone wants to add a thing or still has one burning question. Oh yeah, Marina found the link, and CG asked how was the name of the guy, so I guess Tante, right? Tante?
Yeah, his full name is Goiter. It's the last name. I forgot his first name. And here you can see his statement on metaverse and crypto world. So I think that's what we are searching. And at least they are discussing it, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks a lot. And so with this, I mean, we saw today different approaches to space and spatiality. We talked about soundscapes, the relevance of soundscapes. The archive popped up a lot more than I was expecting, but in such interesting forms that I was very amazed. We spoke about artworks as avatars, about ghosts and totems, and virtual museum dependencies as kind of a decolonial research into museum heritage. We touched on swarm curation, and we were reminded of the material and ecological grounding of our projects and, our responsibilities as museum professionals, institutions, or people in the cultural field. So with this, I think I'm just going to say thank you so much to all our speakers. Huge congratulations to the Beyond Matter team. Your project is really, really amazing, and I wish everyone all the best in the continuation of their projects. Thanks so much, and see you soon, I hope, somehow, somewhere. Take care.